They handed me an envelope, sealed, official-looking, cold. "This is just business, Amy," my brother Mark said, refusing to meet my eyes. But this wasn't business. This was my home. The porch where Dad taught me to tie my shoes. The kitchen where Mom danced with flour on her face. Now they wanted me gone. I stood barefoot in the living room, staring at the legal document that told me to vacate the house within 30 days. No conversation. No warning. Just signatures. "Grandpa never meant for this place to rot," my cousin Rachel added, as if I were some kind of mold.
Rot?
"I kept this house standing after he died. I paid the taxes. I fixed the pipes. I kept his garden alive. And now they wanted me out?" I clutched the paper, my chest hollow and hot. I wasn't crying.
Not yet.
But my voice was shaking. "This isn't over," I whispered. "Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who called you family? Comment below if you've ever been forced out of the place you called home." The house on Willow Creek Lane was never just a house. It was a living thing, a vessel of memories, full of worn wood and sunlight. It creaked like an old man telling stories, and I knew every one of them. My name is Amy Carter. I grew up in that house with my parents, my older brother Mark, and our family dog, Bailey. But it wasn't until I was 15 that Grandpa Joe moved in and made the place feel truly sacred. He wasn't just a grandfather. He was my protector, my best friend. He had a gentle way of seeing things others missed. When the rest of the family dismissed my art as a cute hobby, he framed my sketches and hung them above the fireplace like museum pieces. We'd sit on the back porch during summer, and he'd tell me stories from his Navy days, sipping iced tea while I sketched in my notebook. He'd say, "You've got eyes like a poet, Amy. That's rarer than gold." After Grandma passed, he chose to leave his retirement community and move into our home. Mom wasn't thrilled, but Dad said, "It's family. We don't abandon each other." I believed that line for most of my life. I didn't realize how much I loved that house until I left it for college in Chicago. Every winter break, I'd return, and something about the smell of cedar, the faded wallpaper in the upstairs hall, and the way light poured in through the bay window reminded me who I was. When my parents passed away in a car accident during my junior year, it was Grandpa Joe who sat beside me at the funeral. He didn't say much, just held my hand the entire time. That night, as we sat in the quiet living room, he said, "I know it feels like the world dropped you, but this house, it's still your anchor." I moved back home shortly after, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because the silence of that place didn't scare me. It held my grief in a way no person could. I finished college online, commuting to the city when I had to. I turned the upstairs guest room into a studio for my design work. Grandpa would knock on the door with cookies and say, "Tell me about that weird thing you're drawing today." He gave me the downstairs master bedroom 2 years later, saying he preferred the upstairs sunroom anyway. "Besides," he grinned, "you snore like your daddy did, and I need some peace." We laughed so hard that day. It's strange the things you remember most. Laughter in the hallway, the way his slippers shuffled across the wood, the smell of his pipe tobacco in the den. And then came Ethan. I met Ethan Myers at the local bookstore downtown. I was balancing a stack of design books, fumbling with my coffee, when he caught one that nearly hit the floor. "Looks like someone's planning to remodel the Sistine Chapel," he joked. He was tall, always slightly unshaven, and had this mix of confidence and softness that made you want to know his story. Turns out, he'd just moved from Denver, tired of city life and looking for something with a heartbeat. We dated quietly at first. I wasn't used to being seen, but Grandpa Joe noticed. One evening, he looked at me over his crossword puzzle and said, "That boy loves you, you know. I can tell by the way he watches your hands." It took me a minute to understand what he meant. Ethan did watch my hands, when I painted, when I stirred soup, when I brushed my hair behind my ear. He saw the parts of me that no one else cared to. We got married in the backyard, under the old oak tree. It was a small ceremony, just a few friends, Grandpa Joe, and my brother Mark and his wife Rachel, who arrived late and left early. I remember Grandpa standing beside me, holding my hand before I walked down the aisle. He whispered, "You've come home to yourself, Amy. That's the real marriage. Ethan moved into the house with me and Grandpa, and somehow, the place stretched to fit our life. We kept the kitchen vintage the way Grandpa liked, but Ethan built me a new studio over the garage. He installed solar panels, refinished the hardwood floors, and always made sure Grandpa's garden beds were perfectly turned each spring. We had our first child, Lily, 2 years later. I remember the way Grandpa held her, like she was made of breath and light. He started calling her Little Moon because she'd only sleep when he sang his old Navy lullabies. Life was full,
Slow.
rich in all the ways that didn't show up in bank accounts. Mark and Rachel rarely visited. When they did, it was always tense. Rachel would make backhanded comments like, "Wow, Amy, must be nice to live in a free house," even though Ethan and I covered all the expenses. Mark, on the other hand, would wander around the property like he was inspecting it. "You've really changed the place," he once said, his voice unreadable. I tried to ignore it. Family is family, right? But I started noticing things, questions about Grandpa's will, about the house deed, about keeping things fair. Once, Mark asked Ethan outright if he planned on claiming the house after Grandpa passed. Ethan handled it with grace. "This house belongs to the memories it holds. We're just keeping it warm." But I felt the chill from Mark that day, and it never fully went away. One quiet afternoon, when Lily was 5 and Grandpa's joints were slowing him down, we sat on the porch and he took my hand. "You know I've left the house to you, right?" he said. I nodded, unsure what he meant to say. "I had the papers drawn up 2 years ago. You've kept this place alive, Amy. You brought it back to life after everyone else gave up. That house isn't a prize. It's a legacy. And I trust you to honor it." I didn't ask for proof. I didn't need to. Grandpa Joe was the only man in my life who had never broken a promise. He passed away the following spring. We buried him beneath the same oak tree where I got married. Lily pressed a drawing of him and her together into the earth before they covered the casket. She called it Papa's forever home. After the funeral, Rachel muttered, "Well, I guess now it's a question of who gets what." I ignored her. I was too busy grieving the only person who'd ever truly seen me. Weeks passed. We waited for the will to be read. Ethan reached out to the family lawyer, Mr. Benson, who confirmed that the will existed, but that it hadn't yet been filed with the county. Then suddenly nothing. Benson stopped responding. The lawyer's office closed for restructuring. Mark and Rachel were suddenly evasive, offering hollow condolences, talking vaguely about selling the place to avoid legal complications. That's when the visit started. Mark would drop by unannounced. Once he brought a contractor to evaluate repairs. Another time, Rachel asked if Lily's room could be converted into a home office. When I asked what they were talking about, Mark simply said, "We just want what's fair." The first time I really felt it, the shift, the tightening of something in the air, was 3 weeks after Grandpa's funeral. I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing the tea mugs he and I always used. Lily was outside on the swing Ethan had built. The wind carried the faint sound of her laughter through the screen door. Then I heard gravel crunching. Tires. It was Mark. Again. He didn't knock. He just walked in like he owned the place. "Rachel said to grab the photo albums before you ruin them," he said, brushing past me toward the hallway closet. I dried my hands and followed. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "You boxed up Grandma's photos. Those belong to the whole family, Amy." I froze. "They're in the cedar chest," I said quietly. "I haven't touched them," Mark scoffed. "You shouldn't get too comfortable here. We're still sorting everything out. You know, legally." There was that word again. Legally. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove him out the door and say this was my home, but I was still clinging to the belief that we were just grieving differently. That time would heal the distance. That Grandpa's love would shield me. It wouldn't. Ethan noticed at first. "They're circling," he said one night as we folded laundry. "Like vultures." I frowned. "It's just grief. It's confusing for everyone." He looked at me, really looked at me. "Amy, they're trying to push you out. I don't care if it's your brother. He's not acting like family." I didn't want to believe it. We hadn't seen the will. No one had. Mr. Benson, the lawyer Grandpa trusted, had apparently resigned and moved to Florida. When I called the office, I got nothing but voicemail. "I'll find out what's going on," Ethan said. "They can't just erase what Grandpa told you." Mark and Rachel began treating the house like a group project. Rachel emailed a spreadsheet labeled Family Asset Overview. It had itemized every piece of furniture, every appliance, even Grandpa's military medals. At the bottom, she'd written, "Discuss percentage-based value distribution." I called her. "What is this?" She answered with that infuriating tone, half fake kindness, half condescension. "Just trying to be organized. Once we sell the house, it'll be easier to divide things." "We're not selling the house," I said. She laughed. "Amy, come on. You can't maintain this place forever. It's too big. Too much upkeep. I've been maintaining it for years, while you were vacationing in Aruba and calling once a month." She went quiet. Then she said, "Let's not make this emotional." I hung up. The worst moment came when I returned home from Lily's dance recital one Saturday. Rachel had a key Grandpa had given her 1 year ago, just in case. She never returned it. When I walked in, her SUV was already parked outside. She was in the study, Grandpa's study, with her sister-in-law, going through boxes. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. "Mark said I could take the antique desk. It's not like you use it." "That's not yours to take." She gave me a tight smile. "It's not yours either." That desk was where Grandpa wrote me letters when I was away at college, where he signed my first tax return, where he framed my first freelance check like it was a trophy. I felt my chest tighten, my throat burning. "You need to leave," I said. She rolled her eyes and walked past me like I was invisible. Ethan kept pressing the legal side. He spoke to 3 different probate attorneys, but without an official copy of the will on file. Everything was hearsay. If they lost it, or if it was never registered, it could be contested, one lawyer said. "Do you have any witnesses to what your grandfather promised?" My heart sank. No recording. No notarized backup. Just his voice in my memory. Rachel and Mark claimed they were working with another lawyer to handle estate distribution, but refused to share the name. Then came the real blow. They presented an old version of a will, dated 8 years ago, that divided the house between Mark, Rachel, and me equally. No mention of Grandpa's promise. No amendment. No codicil. "That's not the final version," I said. They shrugged. "Unless you can prove otherwise," Mark said. "This is all we've got." Family friends who once dropped by with casseroles after Grandpa died slowly stopped visiting. Somehow, the narrative had changed. I overheard whispers in town about how I was squatting in the house, refusing to sell, making it difficult for the family. The worst part? I couldn't prove my truth. Not yet. Even my Aunt Diane, who once told me I was Joe's favorite heartbeat, sent a cold message saying, "I hope you'll do the right thing and let this be handled peacefully." Handled? I wasn't a loose wire. I was his granddaughter. The one who cared for him till his final breath. Who brushed his hair when chemo made his scalp sore. Who sat beside him at 2 a.m. when the nightmares came. But none of that was in a legal file. None of that counted. Kids always feel things first. Lily started asking questions. "Why did Uncle Mark take Papa's books?" "They're just borrowing them." I lied. "Why doesn't Aunt Rachel like our house?" I knelt beside her. Sometimes people get confused about what matters. "But we know, right?" She nodded, but her eyes looked older than 7. That night, she brought me a drawing of our house. Under it, she wrote in crayon, "Ours forever." I taped it to the fridge and cried in the laundry room so she wouldn't hear. Desperate, I began combing through old photos, receipts, anything that could show I'd been the caretaker, that this house was more than a dwelling. It was ours. I found a handwritten note from Grandpa dated 2 years before he passed that read, "Amy, don't let them take what you've saved." A photo of him and me signing something at the dining table. Maybe the will? Email threads with Mr. Benson where he mentioned finalizing transfer documents. I printed it all, made a binder. I needed to believe the truth could still matter. The day everything broke was a Thursday. I remember that detail clearly, not because anything special happened, there were no holidays, no appointments, but because the air felt wrong. Still.
Too quiet.
It was the kind of silence that hangs in the air before lightning strikes. Ethan had taken Lily to school, and I was sorting through Grandpa's keepsake chest. The one Mark never noticed, the one Rachel said smelled like mildew. It smelled like cedar and cigar smoke to me, like comfort. I found more letters. One addressed to my dearest Amy, dated just 5 months before he passed. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and there's a storm coming. People who wear family faces might try to take what doesn't belong to them. Don't be afraid to fight, sweetheart. You are my legacy. I had just closed the envelope when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Mark and Rachel stood there, not alone. 2 men in suits flanked them. One of them stepped forward. Amy Carter? I nodded, instantly uneasy. He handed me a thick folder and said, "This is a formal notification of partition intent. Your brother and cousin are filing a motion to divide and sell the property. You'll have 60 days to respond." Rachel offered a tight smile, like this was a favor. "We tried to do this the easy way, Amy. But since you refused to cooperate," Mark added, "you've had your time here. It's time to be fair." I stared at the papers. I felt like I was holding ice. My hands trembled. "You can't do this." "Grandpa, he left it to me." Mark didn't even blink. "Then prove it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out. But I just stood there as they turned and walked down the porch steps like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just gutted my entire world in under 60 seconds. That night, Ethan and I called every lawyer we knew. Most said the same thing. Without the registered will, we were vulnerable. We needed something concrete. Then we got a call from someone unexpected. It was Mr. Benson's former paralegal, a woman named Jenna. She said she had worked with him on Grandpa's estate and had seen the updated will with her own eyes. I remember Amy's name was the sole heir to the property. It was clear. Joe was adamant, she said over speakerphone. I even made him double-check it. "Then what happened?" I asked. She hesitated. 2 weeks after Joe passed, Mark showed up with power of attorney documents. I never saw the final will again. The file disappeared. My stomach dropped. "You're saying he tampered with it?" "I'm not saying that," Jenna replied carefully. "I'm saying it was there, and then it wasn't." And the office went under shortly after. Ethan and I sat in silence after the call. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. Weeks passed. I lived in a fog. One morning, I found a court envelope in the mailbox, sealed, thick, and official. I opened it with trembling hands. A formal court date. Mark and Rachel versus Amy Carter. Petition to force sale and equal distribution of inherited property. There it was. In ink. They were going to legally push me out of my home. I stood in front of the mirror that night. My reflection looked like a stranger. Sunken eyes, messy hair, shoulders slumped forward like defeat had settled into my bones. "I can't fight this," I whispered to Ethan. "Yes, you can," he said. "You have to." I shook my head. "They have the papers, the lawyers, the money." He took my hand. "You have the truth."
And me.
And Lily. And Grandpa's words. That counts for something. The next morning, I found a shoebox in the attic. It was marked for Amy, if it gets bad. Inside was Grandpa's Navy medal, a flash drive, and another letter. "I hope this box stays dusty. But if it doesn't, this flash drive has a video. I recorded it at Benson's office. Just in case." My hands trembled as I ran to my laptop. Ethan watched with me. It was him, Grandpa Joe, sitting at Benson's desk, holding a pen. His voice was weak but clear. "I, Joseph Allen Carter, being of sound mind, leave the house at 143 Willow Creek Lane to my granddaughter, Amy Carter. She has taken care of me, this property, and our family legacy. This is my last will and testament, made without coercion." I sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. There he was, telling the truth when no one else would. 2 days before the court hearing, Mark and Rachel showed up again unannounced. Rachel wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. Mark had that smug air of someone who thinks he's already won. "I hope you're prepared for court," Rachel said. "We really don't want to drag this out." I stared at them. "You didn't think I'd find it, did you?" Mark's smile faltered. "Find what?" "The video." His face dropped. Rachel snapped. "What video?" "The one where Grandpa reads his final will. Recorded, dated, time-stamped. I've already sent it to my attorney." The silence was delicious. Terrifying, but delicious. Mark's voice cracked. "That's not admissible." "It was filmed in Benson's office. He set it up. And Jenna's willing to testify." Rachel turned on him. "You said everything was gone." I stepped forward, my voice shaking but firm. "You tried to erase me. But you forgot one thing. He trusted me more than he ever trusted either of you. And now the court will know that too." They left without another word. That night, I tucked Lily into bed. She held my hand longer than usual. "Are we going to lose the house, Mommy?" I kissed her forehead. "No, baby. We're going to win it." She nodded, sleepy. "Because it's full of love, right?" I smiled. "Exactly." Then I went downstairs and watched Grandpa's video 3 more times, whispering "thank you" to the screen through tears. The courtroom was cold, sterile. Mark sat to my left with his lawyer, looking composed. Rachel wore a black dress like she was attending a funeral, mine probably. Our side was smaller. Me, Ethan, my lawyer, and Jenna, who had flown in to testify. The judge asked for statements. Mark's attorney argued lack of documentation, old paperwork, shared ownership. Then our lawyer played the video.
Gasps.
Murmurs. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Then Jenna took the stand. Calm, direct, brave. She told them everything. How Mark had visited the office. How the file mysteriously vanished. How Grandpa was adamant about his choice. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My grandfather raised me. I fed him, bathed him, walked him through chemo, and gave him comfort when no one else could be bothered. This house isn't just property. It's proof that love means showing up. Not just when it's convenient, but always. The courtroom was still when I sat back down. 1 week later, the judge delivered his ruling. The video was accepted as testamentary evidence. The house, every square inch of it, was mine. Mark and Rachel were ordered to cease all attempts at possession. No appeal would be considered unless new evidence surfaced. I walked out of that courthouse into the sunlight, holding Ethan's hand and Grandpa's medal in my pocket. The ruling should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because when someone tries to steal your name off a deed, they don't just walk away quietly when they lose. They linger. They whisper. They come back with guilt, manipulation, and half-hearted apologies wrapped in guilt trips. Mark and Rachel weren't done with me. Not by a long shot. But I was done with them. It started with a voicemail. "Hey, Amy, it's Mark. Listen. I know things got out of hand. Maybe we just all had our wires crossed. I never wanted things to be ugly between us. Maybe we could talk." I didn't call back. Then a text from Rachel. "We're all hurting. Grandpa would have hated this. Can we please put this behind us?" Behind us? They had tried to erase me.
Gaslight me.
Legally evict me from the home I held together with scraped knuckles and sleepless nights. And now that I'd won, they wanted peace. But what they really wanted was control. Instead of texting, I wrote them both a letter.
Typed. Signed.
Mailed with return receipt. To Mark and Rachel. I received your messages. Thank you for reaching out. But let me be clear. What you did wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't grief. It was greed. You lied. You manipulated. You trespassed on my grief and tried to take the only home I've ever known. I will not be having a conversation, a coffee, or a family dinner about it. The house is mine. You lost. I won't drag your names through the mud, but I also won't let you pretend this didn't happen. I suggest you both take a long look in the mirror and ask yourselves why Grandpa chose me. I won't speak of this again. It was the most empowering moment of my life. Not because I was cruel, but because for once I didn't cushion the truth. I sent a copy to my lawyer. I kept the original in my journal. Then came the real confrontation, not with Mark and Rachel, but with the house itself. See, when you spend years fighting for something, you expect to feel triumphant when you win. I didn't. The first morning I woke up after the ruling, the sun pouring through the windows, the floor creaking under my steps. I didn't feel victorious. I felt haunted. I walked room to room with my coffee cup, and all I saw were ghosts. Grandpa at the kitchen table, marking crossword puzzles. Ethan sanding the banister by hand. Lily's tiny hands smudging the windows. My mother singing with the radio while doing dishes. And then Mark, Rachel, taking up space in my memory like mold in the walls. I stood in the middle of the living room and whispered, "You don't get to stay here." I wasn't talking to them. I was talking to the memories they tried to poison. That's when I decided I wasn't going to leave the house as it was. I was going to reclaim it room by room. I started in Grandpa's study. I took everything out, books, old rugs, even the faded curtains. I kept the desk, but I refinished it. I painted the walls a warm sage green, the color of the moss Grandpa used to grow in jars. I framed one of his letters and hung it above the desk. Next came the hallway. I pulled out every photo, polished each frame, and built a new gallery wall, but this time I included Ethan, Lily, and me. Our family. I turned Rachel's home office idea into Lily's art studio. I even turned the attic, where I found the shoebox, into a writing nook. A place for me to tell this story. A place they could never touch. Ethan helped me sand the porch. Lily helped me replant the roses. We weren't just fixing a house. We were exorcising a betrayal. A month after the ruling, Jenna, the paralegal, called me. "I found something," she said. "It's a scanned letter from your grandfather to Benson. It's not legally binding, but it might give you closure."
She emailed it to me.
It read, "Dear Mr. Benson, if anything ever happens to me before the will is filed, please remember Amy is the one who made this house a home again. Mark and Rachel stopped seeing the soul of this place years ago. But Amy, she never did. Give it to her. No questions." I printed it, framed it, put it next to the front door. It's the first thing I see when I come home, and the last thing visitors see when they leave. 3 weeks later, I hosted a gathering, not for Mark or Rachel, but for the people who actually showed up when it mattered. Aunt Diane came, and so did Grandpa's old Navy friend, Russell. The neighbors, Lily's teacher, Ethan's sister. Even Jenna. We lit candles. Shared stories. Then I did something symbolic. I brought out the old family photo album, the one Rachel tried to collect. And I tore out the pages with Mark and Rachel on them. Gasps echoed around the room. But I didn't flinch. I folded the pages, put them in a small box, and walked outside. I lit them on fire. Watched them burn on the stone path Grandpa built by hand. "I forgive you," I whispered. "But you don't get to stay." I started therapy shortly after. Not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to carry that much rage anymore. My therapist, Dr. Lin, said something I'll never forget. Sometimes, people envy the ones who survive. They couldn't build what you built. So instead, they tried to ruin it. It landed in my chest like thunder. That's what it was. Jealousy wrapped in entitlement. Grief warped by control. They didn't want the house. They wanted the power of taking it from me. But I didn't let them. One night, I wrote a letter to Grandpa. I don't know why, I guess I needed to say everything I couldn't when he was alive. "Dear Grandpa, I kept the house. I kept your garden, your desk, your stories. Mark and Rachel tried. They really did. But they forgot the one thing you always told me. Amy, you don't need to shout to be strong. You just need to stand." I stood, Grandpa, even when my knees shook. And now the house is safe. I miss you every day. But I also feel you when the wind hits the porch swing just right, when Lily draws something strange and perfect, when I sit at your desk and watch the sun move across the wall. I kept the house. But more importantly, I kept your trust. Love. Amy, I thought the courtroom would be the battlefield. I was wrong. The real war began after the dust settled. Because after truth wins, silence follows. A long, complicated silence. Not peaceful, not resolved, just wide, empty space. The kind that echoes. The first week after the court ruling felt surreal. I walked through the house like a guest in a museum curated by my own memories. Every corner whispered reminders of what was lost. Not just Grandpa, but the illusions I once clung to. That Mark loved me. That Rachel could change. That family would always be there no matter what. All gone. Even though I had won, I wasn't celebrating. I was mourning something else entirely, the version of my family I used to imagine. I expected Mark and Rachel to disappear. But the real sting came from everyone who stayed silent. Aunt Diane, who once told me I was the heart of the family, didn't return my messages after the trial. Cousin Beth unfollowed me on Instagram. My childhood friend Naomi messaged me once. I just wish it hadn't come to this. You could have walked away. Walked away? From the home I nursed back to life? It was like watching people slowly turn their backs to the truth. Not because they didn't believe it, but because it made them uncomfortable. One afternoon, I sat in Grandpa's refurbished study, looking through old family albums, what was left of them anyway. I stopped on a photo of me, Mark, and Grandpa fishing when we were kids. Mark had his arm around me, grinning. I was holding up a tiny catfish. Grandpa stood behind us, his hands on both our shoulders. I touched the photo. My thumb brushed across Mark's smile.
Who was that boy?
When did the distance begin? Was it when our parents died and he started drinking too much?
Was it when I stayed and he left?
Or was it always there, hidden under polite words and childhood promises? Grief doesn't just bury the dead. It digs up the truths we tried to ignore. I'd catch myself imagining how it might have been. If Mark had knocked on the door after Grandpa's funeral and said, "Let's keep this house together." If Rachel had helped in the garden or baked Lily a birthday cake. If the family had gathered on the porch like they used to, laughing over lemonade, remembering Grandpa not as a piece of an estate, but as the soul of our bloodline. Instead, I sat alone on the porch swing, listening to wind chimes and wondering how love gets so easily replaced by leverage. 2 months after the verdict, I received a handwritten note in the mail. No return address. It read, "You really should have let it go. Families fight, sure. But dragging it into court? That wasn't right. You won a house, but you lost a family." There was no signature, but I knew the handwriting. Rachel. I burned it in the fireplace without blinking. Later, Lily asked what smelled like paper. I smiled. Just clearing out some lies, baby. Though I had won the court battle, there were still administrative hurdles. Mark tried to appeal, briefly, claiming emotional duress. The judge denied it within a week. He then offered to buy the house from me, to make amends. I laughed. Literally laughed out loud. "No, Mark," I told him on the phone. "You don't get to put your name on the deed by checkbook after trying to steal it through deception." Rachel emailed a request for family heirlooms she believed were still in the attic, an old clock, a quilt Grandma made, a book of recipes. I returned the book. Nothing else. The clock stayed on the mantel. The quilt stayed on Lily's bed. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, or the battle, or the silence that followed. The hardest part was the clarity. Because once you see people for who they are, you can't unsee it. I realized I had spent most of my life editing people in my mind, softening Mark's temper, rationalizing Rachel's spite, filling the silence with imagined love that never truly existed. Now I saw them clearly, and that vision didn't include them in my future. So I let them go. Lily was my anchor. She started calling the house ours again unprompted. Every time she set the table or watered the porch plants or curled up in Grandpa's recliner, it reminded me that while some things were lost, others remained beautifully intact. Ethan built us a reading bench under the bay window. We started hosting Sunday night soup dinners with friends. We carved pumpkins on the porch in October and built a snow fort in the yard come December. The house wasn't haunted anymore. It was healing. On a rainy Friday in March, Mark showed up. No warning. Just pulled up in his truck, parked half on the lawn like he used to when we were kids. I didn't open the door. I stepped out onto the porch and stood behind the screen. He looked older, tired, but I didn't feel pity. He held up a manila envelope. I thought you should have these. Some photos. And one of Dad's watches. I kept it too long. I didn't move. He cleared his throat. I know you hate me. I stayed silent. But you were right. Grandpa chose you. He held the envelope out through the screen. I didn't reach for it. I'm not ready, I said. He nodded slowly. I don't think I am either. Then he turned and walked away. I never opened the envelope. I left it on the shelf, next to Grandpa's medal. Maybe someday I will. Maybe not. But it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need his apology. I had closure. That spring, I finally brought Grandpa's garden back to full bloom. Lily helped me plant tomatoes, sunflowers, and tiny rows of lavender. We laid down a stepping stone path that curved around the old oak. Ethan built a wooden sign, and Lily painted the words, Joe's Peace. Neighbors began to stop by. Children played tag under the tree. We even held a community potluck in the yard, with lights strung from the eaves and Grandpa's swing freshly painted. And when dusk settled in, and the candles flickered gently along the walkway, I looked around at the home I fought for, and finally felt it again. Not just ownership. Not just victory. Belonging. Time didn't heal everything, but it gave things space to breathe. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not pretending, but letting the pain take up less room, so something better can grow beside it. It was an ordinary morning. Sunlight coming through the kitchen window. The smell of toast. Lily humming in the background, drawing birds at the table. Ethan reading the paper. I was standing at the sink, washing a mug, Grandpa's old one, the one with the chipped rim, and I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the past. Not of the silence. Not of who might try to take this from me again. I was home. Fully. Finally. And I didn't owe a single person an explanation. Therapy helped me find that stillness. I didn't go to fix myself. I went to understand what had broken, and what I'd unknowingly built on top of it. Dr. Lynn never rushed me. She listened as I unraveled decades of family dynamics, grief, abandonment, and love tangled with duty. One day, I told her, I keep trying to forgive them, but it never sticks. She smiled gently. Forgiveness isn't always a door you walk through. Sometimes it's just deciding not to stand there waiting for someone to walk back through it. That landed deep. I stopped waiting for apologies. Stopped explaining myself to people who refused to listen. Stopped romanticizing the version of family that had only ever existed in my head. I started writing again. Not just in journals, but publicly. I created a blog. Home is Earned. It was raw, personal, quiet. Just photos of the house, stories of Grandpa, small reflections on grief and boundaries, and becoming your own protector. At first, only 10 people read it, then 100, then thousands. Emails started flooding in. I was cut out of my grandmother's life when she died. This helped me feel seen. My siblings did the same thing to me. I never had the courage to fight back. You did. Thank you for saying it's okay to walk away from toxic people, even if they share your blood. Some readers shared their own battles. Some had lost their homes. Some had lost their peace. Some had never even dared to fight. I answered every message for weeks. Not because I was an expert, but because I knew how it felt to scream into the void, hoping someone else had been there too. We rebuilt rituals, ones that felt like ours. Friday night pancakes with Lily, even if it wasn't breakfast time. Board games on the porch. Random dance parties in the hallway with socks sliding on the polished wood. Ethan and I reading aloud to each other, even when we'd already heard the stories before. Every creak of the floor, every echo in the hallway, slowly transformed from reminders of betrayal into rhythms of life. Even Grandpa's absence became something gentler. Not a void. A presence. Quiet, steady, warm. One summer evening, I stood in the garden watching Lily paint smooth stones with her best friend, Emma. They were making wish rocks to hide in the flower beds for neighbors to find. That night, I had an idea. Why not open the house just a little? Not for family. For others who'd lost their own safe spaces. I started small, a Saturday writing circle, then a grief journaling group, then a garden healing day once a month for women going through tough transitions, divorces, deaths, family estrangement. The house filled with quiet laughter, tears that didn't have to be explained. People who understood that pain wasn't something to hide, but something to water until it softened and grew something new. One of the most unexpected parts of healing? Writing letters I would never send. To Rachel. To Mark. To my parents. To the version of me who was too afraid to speak up for so long. I kept them in a box in the attic. Right next to Grandpa's if it gets bad box. It's where the pain stays now. Not in my throat. Not in my bones. Not in my breath. Just in a box. Safe. Quiet. No longer ruling me. One afternoon in late spring, Lily called me outside. "Look," she yelled, pointing to the oak tree. There, on the lowest branch, was a small wooden swing Ethan had built while we weren't looking. He'd carved the initials. JC, AMC, LC. 3 generations. I cried. But not the kind of crying I did when I was grieving. This was different. It was gratitude. The kind that shakes you from the inside. The kind that says, "You made it." We held a small ceremony that summer. Not a memorial, a reclaiming. Just us, a few close friends and neighbors. Everyone brought something from their own healing. A letter, a flower, a stone. We buried them in the garden beneath the new lavender patch. Not as grief, but as roots. Then we stood in silence as Lily read a poem she wrote herself. This house is not broken. It creaks because it remembers. It sighs because it's strong. It stands because someone stayed. And now it grows. And now we belong. If you've watched all the way to the end, thank you. Truly. Because telling this story wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. It wasn't simple. It was messy, emotional, raw, and deeply personal. But I shared it because I know I'm not the only one. I know someone out there is sitting in a room that used to feel like home and doesn't anymore. I know someone just got the call about a will that wasn't what they expected. Or maybe the silence after a funeral was louder than the grief itself. Maybe someone you trusted suddenly became someone you had to protect yourself from. If that's you, I see you. And you're not alone. People love to say, but they're family. As if that sentence erases every betrayal. As if blood is a bandage you should keep wrapping around your wounds, no matter how many times it bleeds through. But here's what I've learned. Family isn't who shares your DNA. Family is who shows up when your hands are shaking and your heart is breaking. Family is who doesn't ask you to shrink to fit inside their comfort. Family is who says, "I believe you," and means it. So if you've been made to feel selfish, dramatic, or disloyal for standing up for yourself against someone with your last name, you're not the problem. You're the survivor. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to say, "No more." You are allowed to take back what was stolen, whether that's a home, your truth, or your peace. You're even allowed to walk away from people who raised you if they no longer treat you with the dignity you deserve. Rebuilding yourself doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. And let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You do not have to stay small just to keep the peace. Maybe you're watching this from the middle of your own storm. Maybe your siblings are fighting over something sacred. Maybe someone's trying to take your inheritance, your home, or your voice. Or maybe you're grieving someone who died, and grieving the way people changed afterward. If that's you, I want to say this clearly. You're not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are not weak for breaking down in the hallway or screaming into your pillow at 2 a.m. or pacing circles around your kitchen wondering if it's worth it. You are a person trying to hold on to yourself while everything around you shifts. And that's a kind of bravery no one talks about. I fought for a house, but what I got back was so much more than bricks and wood. I got back my story. I got back my confidence. I got back the parts of me that believed I was worth fighting for. And even on the days when it was quiet and hard and lonely, I held on to one truth. They tried to make me leave, but I stayed. And now, I own every piece of it. Not just the deed, but the soil, the silence, the soul of the place. I reclaimed it. And if I could do that, you can reclaim yours too. If any part of this story hit close to home, drop a comment below. Even just one word. Same. Or tell me more. Tell us. This isn't just my story anymore. It belongs to all of us who've been told to shut up, sit down, or walk away quietly. We're louder together. We're braver together. We heal in community, even if we have to build it ourselves. So share your truth. And if you're comfortable, say where you're watching from. I love seeing how far stories like this travel. It's powerful. Because sometimes someone thousands of miles away is going through the exact same storm, and they just need to know they're not facing it alone. You did not deserve what happened to you. You are not weak for being heartbroken. You are not dramatic for saying this isn't okay. You are not disloyal for telling the truth. And you are not wrong for choosing yourself, especially when no one else did. You are allowed to mourn what could have been. You are allowed to rebuild what should have been. You are allowed to make something beautiful out of the ashes they left behind. If this story helped you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, like this video, leave a comment, even if it's just a thank you. Subscribe for more real stories that say the quiet part out loud. We are not here to be polite about pain. We are here to rise from it. And if you're still standing after everything they tried to bury you with, that's not just survival. That's your story starting over.